Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, of course, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, lovely to see you. On today's episode, we're back with another podcast, and this week it's actually a themed podcast. We've done other themes before. Romantic comedies, unconventional romances, those kind of things. And today we're back with perhaps many would argue it's a bit of a taboo subject in society. Not for us though, not for us. It is sex addiction. So I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain what movies we're going to be talking about today, mate. So yeah, off to you.
Yes, so as you said, we will be discussing films with the shared theme of sex addiction, starring a main character who is afflicted with the addiction to sex. I think in the way that we're going to review these films today, I think we're not going to, review them in relation to how they portray the addiction, because it's,
Yes.
in all honesty, not something we know anything about really,
Yeah.
but simply, just how much we like the films, really. It might not be a funny episode, because I do think these movies do portray sort of a sad existence that I think is at times difficult to watch. The
Definitely.
films that we'll be talking about today are all exceptionally different. We'll be talking about Alfie from 1966, Shame from 2011, and Thanks for Sharing from 2012. And these films are, they can be more different really.
Oh yeah.
Alfie is sort of this kind of sees itself as this sort of romantic film. Shame is this sort of tragic exploration of the existence, when you're addicted to sex. And then well, I mean, Thanks for Sharing sort of a debatable kind of film, but I feel like it's
Yeah.
sort of the glamorized Hollywood version of that
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
living.
It is, isn't it? No, it absolutely is. So you've got a really great slate today of a very different films from different eras as well. I know Alfie, like you said, 1966. So it's a bit of an old one, old classic. But yeah, just before we kick off today's episode, this podcast will of course be added to our theme playlist, which you can see, our time loop movies, Christmas classics, all those ones, crime and stuff. So yeah, that'll be added to there. And yeah, of course, thanks very much to everyone who supported us recently. Callum and I really do appreciate that loads. And of course, you can check out the time codes for individual movies or our email, moviematespodcast@gmail.com, in the description below. So I suppose chronological order is the classic movie mates tradition. So I suppose that would be Alfie then.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you want to kick
Well,
us off.
just the immediate reaction with this film is that it's just unbelievably British. Couldn't be more
Yeah.
British if it tried.
No, absolutely. And of course, with Michael Caine, the best voice in Hollywood for me, up there with, Morgan Freeman and, Samuel L. Jackson. He is the definitive British man, in my opinion, the classic, just, proper Cockney geezer. Do you know what I mean? That is just what he is. I love it so much. It's great. So
And one
British.
thing that really surprised me with this film, and it's one of the things that I would have never expected from a film of this era, is that it breaks the fourth wall. I was just taken so aback so immediately, because I mean, initially you're kind of confused at what it's doing because he's not quite looking into the lens, but as the
Yeah,
film goes on, it's a really interesting take on
it
what could
is.
be a slightly duller film if we couldn't really get into the mind of what Alfie's thinking.
Million percent. Like, part of me thought when the fourth wall break was happening, I kind of thought it was maybe going to be like an office style documentary thing where it was like really weird. I'm like, it's sort of done in a weird way where like the other characters within the film don't actually know that he's speaking to someone. Like, he's sort of, but it's weird. Like, it's not as if he sort of paused events and he's speaking to the camera. Like, things are still happening. Like, people will ask him a question, I'll interrupt his monologue to the camera. Like, there's a really hilarious bit, I think, where he's with this nurse and the nurse like tells him say the number 99 and he goes 100 and then she's like 99, sorry, she's like what, he's like no 99. So it's a really good gag there. And yeah, I mean, part of me with the added aspect of the fourth wall break, part of me really likes Alfie. I really don't know why I'm saying that. He's clearly
No,
he's got really bad morals, of course, but I
he's
don't
like the
know.
worst bloke that we've ever talked about on this channel.
I don't know, but he's like part of me thinks like he's not obviously a good person. He's got really bad morals. He's done atrocious things. Um, he's clearly a very selfish individual. But it's just maybe it's Michael Caine. Michael Caine is so charismatic. You know.
Well, one part of his character that I suppose we must address, immediately is the fact that, of course, this episode is a sex addiction episode, but the description of this film, presents him as a sex addicted character. Quite honestly, I'm kind of calling that into question, because
Yeah.
addiction implies that you're sort of helpless to it, but he seems to love his life, so I'm not sure he quite
Yeah.
fits the bill for this episode.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't feel any sort of resentment to that. I wouldn't even call it an addiction. I don't know if he's. I don't. Maybe he's addicted to that lifestyle. I wouldn't say. Yeah, I don't know if he's addicted to sex. It's just as a recreational activity. You know what I mean? Like, I think the fact what I love about this film so much though is like he is sort of the personified version of like yesterday's man, in my opinion. Like he is like like if Alfie existed today, like I don't think people like all the women in this film, they love him. Like they just are absolutely like obsessed with his demeanor. Like they love his confidence, they love his bravado and things like that. But I think today, just in general, like I think this character would be utterly just morally disapproved of, just in the bin. Like rightly so as well. Obviously morals have changed since 1966, but I kind of feel like that it's maybe it was, obviously we weren't alive in 1966, but the woman in this film who he just talks to, like he by his own admission says like he just loves just chatting up random ladies, like he just loves just bumping into them by accident or wherever at a park bench. But I mean here just all the women just absolutely adore him, like they just worship the ground he stands on, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, of all the like horrible things he does within this film, I feel like the least abhorrent thing he does is refer to women as it rather
Oh
than,
yeah, I
she
know.
or them.
uh,
because they're birds anyway. That's probably the least disgusting thing he does, within the film, and that would still in the 21st century, get
yeah,
him cancelled.
yeah, no, for sure. Like, do you think the film does enough to condemn that?
I don't think so, because I think with him addressing the camera, it's his film. It's entirely his narrative. He's in 100% of the film. There's never a scene without him.
Yeah,
So it is wholeheartedly his film. He's in control of it, and I think the fourth wall breaking sort of exacerbates that, because it is
yeah, it's a good
even
shout,
more
that.
so his existence that we're just viewing. And it's
Yeah,
not saying this is a terrible guy. I was reading the Wikipedia, and it said, you know after all of this information, and he goes to the doctors and he finds out he's sick, and then he has a mental breakdown. And I'm like, did he?
yeah, I saw
Like
that in the
it's
Wikipedia as
yeah.
well. Yeah, I thought it was quite
He's
strange. He
he's
just
definitely not having a
collapses.
mental breakdown. He collapses out of fear of death, I suppose. But I mean, aside from that, he's just happy and comfortable
Yeah,
being this terrible person. Uh, he's just unrelentingly terrible throughout the entire film, and I don't think he ever gets. He sees consequences, but I don't think there's ever comeuppance.
yeah, no, I think so. And you know what, one line in the Wikipedia description of this film is, as it says, after, of course, when he and Lily have a child in the film, and of course it's aborted, the child. And it's the line in the Wikipedia, I think I described it as like, this is the only time Alfie faces the consequences of his actions. And yeah, that is certainly true. But yeah, as you said, but he never really faces a comeuppance where, like, how would I say, like, karma would work, and that's the way I would sort of put it. Like, he never gets his just desserts by the end, if you know what I mean. Like, he just looks at the camera, he's like, what's this all about? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
And
it.
in the moment where he cries, he elaborates and says that he was crying tears for himself at his situation. So I mean, even after
Yeah,
that
yeah.
act has been performed, he still continues to only think of himself. So I
Hmm.
mean, he's just a
Definitely.
all around bad bloke. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
I think of the three leads that we're going to be talking about today, he's outwardly the most charming. He's this womanizer. People clearly are drawn to him. They see him as a nice guy, or at least
yeah.
a guy that they would want to have sex with. But just watching it, of course, seeing his inner monologue, he's just horrendous, really.
Yeah, he is like a one of my favorite films of all time. This is Don John. He's like,
Hmm.
I almost find the Don John character in that film more likable. Not more likable, but like he's less sort of. I can't really criticize the Don John character there as much as Alfie. Like, they're very similar, and then like they're
Yeah,
womanized and they love sex. Obviously, I would probably say Don John's a little more similar to potentially like Brandon because of the pornography aspect there as well, and
yeah,
shame. But I think there is comparisons there. Like, although Alfie, I think, it does way worse. Like that, do you know what I mean by that? He's almost like the Don John character if he never stopped watching pornography. If that makes sense.
yeah. I think with Don John, he seems he's not really hurting anyone, is he? I haven't
Yeah.
really seen the film in a number of years. In the end, he does enjoy sex, and he's addicted to pornography. But he's in no way demeaning towards the women that he has sex with, as Alfie is. I
Yeah.
I, I
Agree.
I
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
fully
Yeah.
comment on the morality of Don John, because I haven't seen the film in a fair few years. I'm sure we'll be talking about it anytime soon.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
Because
it's one
I'm
of
sure
my faves.
we both love to see that.
Mhm.
And what one film which I wish we had watched for today, that I sort of thought would maybe be appropriate for a different episode, would be The Escort, which is one of my favorite films of all
Yes.
time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if we do some sort of a amalgam sort of sex work episode, we can maybe talk about the two of them, and maybe Boogie Nights, where
Yeah, for
Mark
sure.
Wahlberg Mark Wahlberg and his famously
Good
huge
old
dick.
Marky. Good old Marky Wahlberg. Famously huge cock. Yeah. As you were, mate. As you were.
So we've talked about his sort of horrendous persona, but it was sort of sweet, to see maybe Malcolm, sort of slowly break down that persona,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
but
for sure.
by any degree, a child deserves a much better father than him.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm kind of glad what's the name of the dude, the bus conductor who marries who
Oh,
marries
Humphrey.
Humphrey. I'm glad that he has like a father figure in him, because he seems quite nice in the film. And yeah, I mean, I think for me, this film deals with many serious themes as well towards the later end of the film. I think it sort of I think one common theme of all the films here today is that they detract towards the end. And I don't know, if maybe that's a thing with sex addiction films, like maybe because I'm not too sure, but I don't know. I think for this film, it almost feels like a totally different film when obviously the abortion consequence and stuff is brought into the picture. And I think for me, I sort of said this off podcast, it does feel like an extended episode like EastEnders or something, that like that sort of Cockney London environment. And I think for me, the fact that it's Michael Caine, I think it's such a charismatic performance. But likewise, I don't think I've ever seen a film where like the actor gives such a charismatic performance, yet the character is so dislikable. Like obviously with Don John, which is this will be the last time I mention it, but like to a certain extent, I kind of like both Don John and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. They're both, they're very different, but in ways similar. Here, I think they're so different. They're like real life counterparts, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed by Michael Caine, because I think we've talked a lot about in films of the distant past,
Yeah, yeah,
60 years or more down the line, acting wasn't really a thing. It was you showed up, you read your lines, you left.
yeah,
You
yeah. That
were
was
supposed
it.
to just
That was
just
it.
say what the script demands, but there wasn't really a performance, a long time ago. But here, I was really convinced that Michael Caine was able to convince me that he was like this sort of Weasley scumbag, and
Yeah, no,
that
for
that
sure.
is a testament to his performance.
Oh, 100%.
Nothing in Casablanca really convinced me that they were that character. But here, Michael Caine, I don't really know what kind of guy he is in real life, but I can't picture he's like this.
No, no, neither. I just imagine Alfred.
And to talk, yeah, I'm glad I don't really have that tie to him, because I'd be judging him for the quality of those films. But we'll get into that
We'll get into
another
them one
day.
day.
You know, but I think in regards to the pace of the film,
Yeah.
they sort of say people do say that older films are a lot slower than modern films. The more I watch them, the more that seems untrue, because Citizen Kane starts with the main character's death and then works its way back, and The Graduate is manages to sort of straddle two romances within it. And this film starts with Alfie feeling the consequences of his promiscuity through Gilda's pregnancy. So like I feel like in a modern film we'd sort of see that that would be the second act, and that would be dealt with in the third.
Yeah.
But with his sort of you know the countless women that he has relationships with, I think that just leads to such a different construction of a film, because you
Oh
never
yeah,
know
yeah.
what is like the inciting incident for the end of the film. It really,
Leaves
the
keeps you
the end of
guessing.
the film is
Keeps you
is, is
guessing.
sort of him feeling the moral repercussions of the abortion. But easily, the first pregnancy that he encounters with Gilda, that I think easily could have been the rev up to the finish.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely spot on there, mate. And it's one of the things, like this film, kind of has a cyclical narrative to it. Like it sort of starts with him with Alfie, facing the consequences of actions, and it ends with it as well. And I kind of think that's another recurring theme in Shame, which we'll talk about next. And I think you're right. The fact that it opens with that kind of narrative, it does keep you guessing as to what's going to be the inciting act that will sort of conclude the film. So I think, yeah, it keeps you guessing, it keeps me engaged, and I wasn't really bored throughout the film, to be honest with you. I thought it was a very, very well paced for an older film. Like I don't think that stereotype is true really for any of the films that I've seen. Sure, you get slow ones, but sure, I think you can get slow modern films as well, to be honest. So I think yeah, it's a fairly good pacing here, for sure.
Yeah, because the sort of the frequent comparison is Star Wars to a film to like an action film of this era.
Yeah,
If you compared Space Sweepers and Star Wars, there's a stark difference between pace, but it doesn't mean one's slow and one's fast. It
yeah.
just means that the they're different.
Hmm.
But I feel like both films manage to squeeze things in and you're never bored. I think
Yeah.
that's what you really need to think about. Does it bore you with the pace it's chugging at? And I think some of these films that we're going to talk about today do have pacing issues. Despite being not particularly long. I think Shame sort of has sort of a bit of an extension of a period of time where there's not much going on, and maybe people would sort of lose engagement a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely definitely mate. Like pace, the one thing I've sort of realized by watching more films, like pace is such an underrated aspect of a film. Like if you have a film that's pretty paced, it ruins everything. Like if I'm not engaged, it ruins every quality for me. So I think pacing is such an underrated aspect. It really is, mate. It really is.
To talk further about the character of Alfie, he was a bad enough guy, leading up to the finish of the film.
Yeah,
Something that made me really lose. I mean, I had no respect for him, but what really put him in the pits for me, at least to this point in the film, because it's of course not the worst thing that he's a part of, but where he tries to bring down honest guys like his roommate Harry, down to his level of disrespect for women.
yeah, I know.
I thought their relationship was at least sweet, but then Alfie shags Harry's wife, and he just proves what a terrible guy he is.
I know, yeah. He tries to lower people to his level, doesn't he? And I think he's one of the aspects of his character. Like he doesn't even see the errors of his own ways. He's just stuck in that mindset, and there's no like one comment I saw. There's no sort of Hollywood bullshit that tries to give that character any development. Like potentially that's a criticism for the film. Like, but here I kind of respected how the film just allowed him to own what he is. Like he's clearly a person who has no morals whatsoever. Like there's no. I think it would almost be unrealistic if they tried to make him a nice guy by the end. So I really respect the film for sort of just letting him own that and just say, yeah, fuck it, I'm that guy. So I thought I was
Mm.
smart in the film, and I'm glad they didn't try to sort of make him like have him with a redemption arc or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about character arcs within Shame, especially I'd say. And
Definitely.
here, by the end, other characters wise up to the fact that they shouldn't really be associated with Alfie. But as you said, himself, he doesn't really learn the errors of his ways. He takes Ruby cheating on him at the end of the film as a sign that he should just be keep living his life exactly the same way. So there's no lesson learned. But do you
Yeah,
feel like that's a character arc in itself?
I
Because
think
do you
so.
think that was convincingly enough played that that's how that character would
Mm.
receive that kind of information?
That's how I felt anyway. I think because they push Alfie so far, and like how morally awful he is, it would kind of be really unrealistic to just make him a nice guy by the end. But yeah, I think it was almost a character arc in himself. You're right. That's a good way of putting it because I kind of felt like we were saying, actually he just owns who he is. He just is this womanizer who tries to bring people down to his level. He cheats on his with his friend's wife. He has kids that you know that yes he cares about, but over like throughout the film, like he's clearly devastated that he doesn't have Malcolm in his life, but like it's not a plot line that's continued really much further than that. Like he's not clear like up at night just breaking down. Like he's clearly doesn't he's not bothered that much. So I think I just think that yeah, it's a character arc in himself that he just has to own what he is. Like that's his society at the time, perhaps. So that's how I felt about it.
Yeah,
I know you maybe feel differently.
no, I do agree with you that I think it would have felt sort of forced and insincere if they'd given him a redemption arc, because I think he's too unlikable a figure. You go in thinking, it's the main characters. You want to have a good impression going in, good
Yeah,
impression leaving. But if they want to have a sort of scoundrel, main character, that's the film's choice.
yeah,
And I
that's a
think
good
trying
point.
to morally recover him would have felt disingenuous.
Yeah,
You know, so I
definitely.
think, you know, I think that was where this film, as it was presented, needed to go. But I
Yeah.
just worry that, you know, in regards to enjoyment of the whole film, I don't know if the film is maybe too dated, you know, with too unlikable a character to sort of be enjoyed.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really brilliant way of putting it there, man. That I have to agree with you, like for sure.
Yeah, so I would struggle to rate this film. Like, did you have anything further on it?
I didn't have anything further. I mean, I think all these. Maybe Thanks for Sharing is probably the easiest to review. I think for me because Shame, I think is probably the darkest of the three and deals with a very serious themes as this one did. So
Hmm.
I think for me it would be difficult to. I think as maybe as a quality of a film for me, you know, what we've mentioned the pacing, you know, the fourth wall break. I think the fourth wall break's a bit of a game changer for 1966. So on that front, I probably have to give the quality like a 9.5. Like I absolutely love this film. It's one of my favorites from that sort of swinging 60s era. Absolutely. So yeah, but it's a fantastic film. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think if you know, place yourself in the cinemas of 1966 and think, well, what would, you know, my attitude as an audience be back then?
Yeah,
You know, I think this character is designed to be disliked, so I think, you know, that doesn't change with time, but certainly the attitudes, the quality of the filmmaking do. So I can't really, you know, give it any shit for how it looks or sounds, you know, because I feel like that would be unfair, you know, for being, you know, you know, so far in the past.
yeah,
You know, for us, this was, you know, lifetimes ago. You know, I'm sure that that's not the case for, you know, many people who watch these kinds of films today. But, you know,
hmm
for us, you know, it's inconceivable how old this film is really.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
It is.
so, you know, taking that into account, I definitely agree with you. Fourth wall break, pacing, acting, revolutionary. Because, you know, just if we fast forward to 1968, you know, we get The Graduate, and, you know, that's and you know, Marvel filmmaking, but even the acting
Yeah,
there is, you know, sort of interchangeable. You know, Dustin Hoffman is doing exactly what he needs to. You know, I've read the Graduate book, and, you know, that's it's kind of a thankless role. You know, he's doing exactly what he needs to, but I feel like any actor could do, you know, what that character needs. But
hmm
here, I was 100% convinced by Michael Caine. You know, something that, you know, an actor of that era hasn't really been able to do for me.
yeah,
You know, before this. So I would have to rate the film fairly favorably. You know, but I think some criticism can be drawn from the fact that the person you're spending so much time with is like so horrible that you don't even really want to watch them. You know,
yeah,
you don't want them to succeed in life, or
yeah.
do anything good, or, you know, something that they enjoy, because he's so unpleasant. And, you know, I mean, I'm just rambling on now,
No,
but, you know,
you're
we
okay.
have
No,
talked about,
I'm enjoying listening to it. I'm
is
enjoying
he
listening to it.
is he addicted to sex, or is he just a prick that gets what he wants? That's sort of, you know, what we need to ask ourselves, because, you know, in Shame and in Thanks for Sharing, I think there's a visible desperation in the main characters there. But here, I think he's overjoyed to just be having sex and doing what he enjoys. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any form of addiction. You know, I think you know, I suppose I made a mistake in picking that for today.
Well, not at
But, you know, I think
all.
we sort of need to see the breadth of the genre, and, you know, in a worst case scenario, you know, it doesn't fit the theme, but, you know, we got to see, you know, a film of the era that we may be able to talk about again in the future. You know,
Yeah,
compare other films of the era
definitely.
too. So, but I don't know that it necessarily fits the docket of the episode. You know, because I do think he's just doing exactly what he wants to. But I would have to rate the film favorably, so I'd probably give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, no, I think that was a really excellent, like perfect summary of it. To be honest, man, I don't think it's you should be too harsh for picking it. I think it definitely stands on its own in the genre. Like maybe it's not as explicit as the other two, as the other two films, but I think those themes are certainly there, for sure. But you know what, one film that we kind of mentioned throughout that review a lot was Shame, starring Michael Fassbender, and this is one of the films I saw previously as well. I absolutely love this film so much. And I know, was this your first time watching it?
Yeah. Oh, it seems like you've seen a fair few sex addiction films, Matthew. Is
Mate,
it a
what can I
genre you
say?
like?
I'm a top shagger, mate. Top shag. No, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just quite like just addiction in general. I think it's a really smart theme. Obviously, you know, Don John is one of my favorites as well as Shame. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to talk to you about this one because it's a very tough film to watch. This, isn't it? It's brutal, mate.
Hmm.
It is brutal. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I sort of was watching it, you know, for 20, 25 minutes before I actually started taking before I actually started taking notes. You
Hmm.
know, the first thing that I really mentioned was this sort of quiet exchange the Brandon shares with the girl in the subway. You
Yeah,
know, it's this exchange of eye contact, with the girl, and it felt so powerful. It's such a small moment, and he gave off, Michael Fassbender really in that moment just gives off this sort of like predatory vibe.
he does,
But
doesn't he?
really,
You're scared of him almost,
what
aren't you?
yeah, you are, especially in the moments whenever he's just sort of laser focused. His desire is sex. That's all that he can think of. He is a scary individual, and I suppose his sort of size and demeanor, kind of factors into that. But here, this actress, gives such an exceptional performance. I think in such a thankless role. Her
A
eyes
million
to me
percent,
conveyed,
yeah.
a really believable, desperate sadness, and like it does sound stupid, but
And
it
no, it
sort of
doesn't.
made me assess how
Yeah,
it made me assess like how little people think about the lives of the people around them, because this is an actress who, you know her character doesn't even get a name, but she gives such a performance, and that's the kind of person you see these people, are out and about, where you sort of
yeah, you
look at
do.
these people that you maybe share eye contact and you think like what kind of life do they live. That this is sort of the first
Yeah,
film that made me think that.
yeah. I know. I'd have to agree with you. That's why I love taking public transport as well. I just I always like
Just there are people.
well, like just people like just think about like what are their lives like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of a similar thing to what we were saying, like for movies we really enjoy, like we kind of like theorized about what's going to happen when the cameras stop rolling there, and this is a film that really has that for me. Obviously you've mentioned that interaction in the train, and this film obviously we've mentioned with Alfie, it has that cyclical narrative, and we'll get into our theories potentially on the end as to whether Brandon relapses or not, and continues his addiction. But I think one thing that blew me away in this movie when I rewatched it a few days ago was that Brandon's sister Sissy is played by Carrie Mulligan, which blows my mind
Hmm.
because she was also in a film we recently reviewed, Promising Young Women, which I didn't. It doesn't look like her at all. Like it's crazy that that's her to me. I think she's a very welcome addition to the film, though.
Yeah, and you get a very immediate, I think, assessment of this character, that she's maybe not trustworthy, and they have a dysfunctional relationship, and we see, of course, that sort of unfold and then sort of spiral by
Yeah,
the end of the film. But I was very surprised, from what I managed to assess about the character of Sissy, that she was actually a legitimate lounge singer. I
yeah, yeah.
assumed that she would have these sort of like illusions of grandeur, and then that would sort of be uh you know that sort of fantasy would be sort of broken down. I thought she was going to be more of a like Blanche figure, from A Streetcar Named
Yeah, yeah,
Desire,
yeah. I thought
where
so.
she was going to have this elaborate fantasy, where she was the star of the stage, and then that was going to be completely betrayed by what we actually see through Brandon's eyes. So that was sort of a big surprise to me, that they allowed that sort of desperate character, that sort of moment of glory, with the very extended musical performance. It's
It's
rare
the
that you
full
see like
song, isn't it?
an
It's the full
entire
song,
song
yeah.
played out in a
It's very
non-musical
rare.
film.
Yeah. I mean that scene is
It's like
marvelous,
four and
to
a
be
half
fair.
minutes long.
It's very, very long, but it's so well done. And on the subject, I think the Streetcar Named Desire performance sorry, comparison is excellent. When I went into this film, I kind of thought, maybe Michael Fassbender's character is going to be a bit like Stanley in that film, like very aggressive, very uh he is aggressive in certain scenes, but like he's not a character, like obviously we've mentioned he's potentially scary, but I'm not necessarily scared because of his aggression. I'm just scared because of his focus and his determination for that addiction almost. Like, but he's also like a very vulnerable character. You know what I mean? There's a lot of scenes where it's
Hmm.
just him and he just has to carry the movie. What I mean? And I think this is the Fassbender's best performance that I've certainly seen. This is like peak
Yeah.
Fassbender for me. This is fantastic.
I mean, I think he, if any character in the streetcar film or play is more accurate, if you're going to compare him to any character, he, I suppose, is more of the Stella figure, that Blanche sort of enters
Yes,
her private
yes,
environment,
it's a
and
good
is
shout.
sort of a tornado within her life, but she of course has her own personal struggles, and then has a tragic ending.
Hmm.
But I suppose just the entry into his life, and the interruption that's there, I suppose, I think is sort of an apt comparison.
Yeah, I think, and I like how Sissy kind of allows him to come out of his shell a bit more. Like, there's a fantastic video essay on this film I watched as well, and like it kind of when Sissy is coming, like this is probably looking way too deep into it, but like she wears like such colorful clothing as well. Like her, obviously we see like with her scarf in particular, but like have you noticed how gray this film is? Like all it is just gray. It's just Brandon like gray suit basically. Like he's clearly a successful individual, but like I think one thing's clear, like there's clearly something holding him back, and that is obviously his addiction to sex, which is obviously the title of today's episode. So I think the way this film deals with sex addiction compared to Alfie, it's so different because this is just, it's very graphic. There's a lot of just, it's just, it is what it does what it says in the tin. Like this is a film about someone's addiction to sex. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll go deep into that, later on. But I sort of struggled to take notes here, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's just like that's fucked or I'm sad, like I feel like a lot of the
Yeah.
film just applies to that. But for a bit of levity, I thought
Go
I
for
thought
it.
I'd mention one of my favorite sort of comedic moments within the film, and that's sort of when Brandon goes on a date with his coworker Marianne, and they have a very desperate waiter trying to get their attention, and it just screams of how I would be in that role, because I feel like in that position I would simultaneously like not give a shit and also like desperately seek the approval of the customers.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, Matthew, as a past waiter, what was your tactic?
Dude, listen, like there's so many funny stories that I've definitely told you off podcast where just I was the worst. I was honestly so bad. But like you do what you do. Like I think there's part of the human experience where you want people's satisfaction for things. Like do you know what I mean? Like you want people to say good job or whatever. And I think you're right. Like it reminded me how I was back in the day for sure.
And another question, asked like positive by Brandon within the film, sort of shortly after that scene, that Brandon asks Marianne, he asks her if you could be anything in any time period, what would you be? And I sort of thought for a bit of fun,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
would you answer that question?
Anything in any time period.
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't, that's a really good question. I'd like to be sort of a fly on the wall when if like during the Apollo 11 launch, or like during the Beatles when they're writing their albums, something just to see what that was like, just a fly on the wall there, or potentially just um yeah, I don't know, like probably just there to experience like how the pyramids were built. Those sort of classic cliches for me. What about yourself, mate?
Well, Brandon chooses, to be sort of within the world of music of is it it's the 60s he chooses. And I think that's a very good choice. But I feel like, within that, that's also encompassed in, you'd probably be amongst the culture of alcohol and drugs, which I wouldn't really be interested in. I'd be interested in, I mean, it sounds like a dorky thing to say, but I'd be interested in the music.
Yeah, of course.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I don't think I could abide by some of the like horrible sort of truths of what culture, or of what if you were living in America, what America was like, in the
Yeah.
60s, of course, to the latter half, you had the civil rights movement. But if you were living in the early 60s, like as a non-white person, that would have been, I mean, it was horrific,
Yeah, no,
and I
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
can't imagine,
yeah,
I can't imagine being there. And that was just the wide opinion. And I just can't
yeah,
imagine living in a time where people thought like that. Of course people do still think like that, but you'd like to think that's a tiny percentage of the population.
yeah. You'd like to think so,
But
anyway. Yeah.
I think the idea of music is certainly admirable. I love music. I would love music at that time, but again, living with the connotations of what people were like, I really don't think that would be possible. And
Mhm.
then, so I think, I mean, 2030s stay at home dad. That's my dream.
I like it. I like it a lot.
You
Like
know,
with
we're
lockdown, you
we're,
probably
we're out
won't
of
be quite as there.
coronavirus, and I don't have to go to work.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
my dream.
dude. Did you? I also saw the announcement. I don't know if we've talked about it since. About June 21st is like everything is hopefully back to normal. I mean, I see a lot of
I mean,
people.
it's not going to be back to normal, because I mean, like I think by that point,
Yeah.
every adult will have been offered the first dose of the vaccine. So
Yeah.
I think that only gives you a sort of limited scope of uh,
Production.
you know protection. Yeah. So
Yeah.
to get to the full 90%, we need the second jab 3 months
Yeah.
after that, and then you have no idea what percentage of people in the UK, adults will actually choose to get it.
Yeah, that's true. And hopefully, viewers, though, you will see it in-person movie mates again sometime in the near future. Hopefully by summertime.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, back to Shame. One thing I really enjoyed about this is, like we kind of saying, that the Michael Fassbender character of Brandon, he's very vulnerable, and it was kind of interesting to see how the film sort of when his boss David, I think, discovers that like Brandon's laptop is just filled with like pornography. Like it's so interesting. Like they just don't assume it's him. Like he just has this persona as like, oh no, Brandon would never do that. Like it's Brandon. Like he wouldn't watch pornography. Do you know what I mean? That's just not his character. I think it's really interesting how that sort of, he just has a facade up all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like he's like too, he's almost got like a personality disorder where like he's only himself when he's at home, and like he's like a different person when he's at work and stuff. I think it was really interesting.
Yeah, I think he does put up a lot of layers, and he sort of hides himself from a lot of people. But the one person he seems entirely comfortable with, or at least is sort of doesn't have the desire to hide things from her, is his sister Sissy. And
Yeah.
we sort of talked about off podcast their relationship, because I hadn't seen the film before, and you've now seen it a few times, and you said to me sort of, you know
Yeah, I
yeah,
did.
maybe prepare yourself for this film to see some stuff. And I think there's a certain level where the tactility between the characters would be acceptable, but just how comfortable and amusing they find seeing each other naked is just mighty uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially for siblings as well. It's another question as to like whether where Brandon gets his attitude from. Like potentially it could. I thought the film was potentially hinting at that they came from like a family where they were both like abused. I'm not too sure if that was what they were hinting towards. I think that could potentially be explored. But yeah, I think you're right. There is a lot of nakedness, and there's a lot of obviously by the end of the film or towards the end, Sissy, um, there's like a really like sort of heartbreaking reveal where like you overhear like the train saying, "Oh yeah, there's been an obstruction on the line," and it's kind of sort of saying it's probably someone's tried to commit suicide, which is quite, doesn't outright say it, but you kind of, I like the film, like it knows its audience intelligence, like it knows that, oh shit, like something's happened here. So yeah, I think it deals with those themes. It takes them seriously, like a lot. Like I think it's, thanks for sharing. Maybe although it takes the theme of addiction seriously, there is sometimes where it does maybe joke about it a little bit, a tad. It doesn't, like, I still love that film as well, but I think here it takes it so seriously, like it respects it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thanks for sharing at times does make a mockery of how tragic it would be to like, because Brandon is a tragic figure. He's nothing like any of the three main characters of Thanks for Sharing. As you said,
Yeah.
like there's a much deeper sadness here, and I was sort of surprised by the subversion that earlier in the film, we see that Sissy was sort of standing near near the train tracks. So to in that moment, I had thought she was the one to have committed suicide on the train tracks. So that was sort of a big subversion that
Yeah.
she was in fact not that person, but she too had attempted to try and commit suicide within Brandon's home. So it was, this film is full of surprises, I think.
It is 1,000,000%. What, one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, Callum, was like, obviously we had mentioned at the start of this review for Shame about the cyclical narrative with the lady on the train. Obviously that plays out differently this time because clearly, I don't know, for me the woman seemed a lot more eager to sort of explore the possibility with Brandon at the train at the final scene. Do you think he goes along with it? Do you think he relapses with his addiction again, or what do you think?
I mean, I think there was no way, there wasn't even really a suggestion that he sort of moved into sobriety, or
That's
that
true. No,
he'd
that's very true.
sort of
Yeah.
overcome anything. So I feel like the film presents just an open season for him to continue being exactly who he is. I sort of wanted to ask you. I mean, this will be jumping ahead a little bit, but do you think for a film of this nature to have a satisfying conclusion, do you think the lead has to overcome, or at least actively fight the addiction, or do you feel sort of the hopeless acceptance that Brandon has by the end, being exactly where he was at the beginning, is just as satisfying? To me, I
Yeah.
think I prefer an arc that ends with development. But when it comes to movies about addiction, so sometimes you have to live with the awful truth that sometimes it's just not possible to overcome.
Yeah, it goes back to the old Alfie thing, he just accepts who he is. And to an extent, I think this film leaves it a bit more open-ended as to whether he does or not. Obviously, it literally just cuts, like he looks up at her and then it just cuts. So, I mean, I don't know. I think part of me would like to think that he just doesn't go along with it and he's changed. But I don't think it would sit in with this character. Like, it's hard to say. I don't know. I do respect the fact that this kind of genre has that character development arc where I think it's perfectly serviceable and satisfying for the character just to accept who they are. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those things where I think, if I watch it again, I'll feel differently, if that makes sense. But yeah, what about you?
Hmm. Yeah, I would have liked to see, either an objective, overcoming of the situation, or a complete collapse. I don't always love, the
Yeah,
suggestion of anything. I think, well, we'll talk about this, and thanks for sharing as well. But I think when it comes to sort of independent cinema, that they often sort of falter at the end, because they don't have source material to, sort of fall
yeah,
back on. They
that's
have to
true. Yeah,
cultivate this ending of their own, and often it doesn't really come with a satisfying end. Here, with the suggestion that I think, he goes on to sort of live the lifestyle that he was, before Sissy came to stay. So I think his life would just be more of the same.
hmm,
And what one thing that we see him do within the film is, near the end of the film, he has an exchange with a woman at a bar who is there with her boyfriend. And quite honestly, I think he got off quite lightly with the beating that he got. He gets
agreed.
maybe punched twice, kicked twice. Honestly, with the exchange that occurs,
Yeah, he
I,
does,
I
doesn't
I
he?
feel like he got off lightly.
Yeah, no, he absolutely does. Yeah, like, I think that's a problem with these kind of film, with these three films. They do detract towards the end, a little bit. Like you said, there's no source material to base an ending on, so they kind of have to, once they've got all the plot lines that they want to have in the film, they kind of feel like, oh man, how do I wrap this up? So I think his Brandon's breakdown is very well handled. It's just, I think certain scenes, like, yeah, like I still like. It's not that I like the character, but I kind of, I don't dislike the character just because he's addicted. If you know what I mean. Like, I think,
Hmm.
yeah, I'll be quite cruel in my part just to dislike him because he's dealing with something. But yeah, I don't know. I think you're right there. He definitely got off flatly. He was just debating with his actions there in the bar for sure.
Yeah, and talking about, Michael Fassbender, I just think his performance is incredible. And this isn't something that I would normally say, but the facial performance he gives during the threesome near the end of the film, like, to me,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
really conveyed to me, that he hates that he needs this. I think there are other films that we've seen, where characters are sort of content with their lifestyle, like in Alfie. I think he's, he sort of questions, is he a good person or not? But I don't think he questions whether he should stop doing what he does. I think he's perfectly content,
mhm,
to do
yeah.
that. I think it's his, he likes having sex, he'll have sex. But here, I think, when he was having sex with the two women, he's sort of,
Oh
he
yeah,
did make a
definitely.
face that suggested, like, that this is a shit existence. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
shame is an apt title for the film, based on, how much he clearly despises his own existence.
Yeah, I think that's such a smart point, actually, and it kind of got me thinking. That's why I find sort of the addiction to sex, that kind of genre, so fascinating, because, like, it's not as if, like, how would I compare it? Like, it's not as if, like, an addiction to sex is like an addiction to cocaine. Like, that cocaine will kill you. Like, sex isn't something, like, just because if you're having sex, like, that shouldn't be something you should feel ashamed of. It's not an illegal act. Like, taking cocaine, like, that like I said, that shit will ruin your life. Like, obviously, to a certain extent, you can be addicted to anything, but I think the fact that because he's addicted to something that so many people have in their lives and they just do normally. The fact that he almost, I think, from Brandon's perspective, like, he's almost doing it to an extent where it's detracting from the experiences he has in his ordinary life. So it's kind of like two
Yeah.
different things. There's like addiction Brandon, then there's like other Brandon. And I think you're right. I do think it just his facial expressions throughout the film, like, he just hates having to do this just to satisfy himself. Like, he just hates having to do it. He just have this compulsory, this urge just to yeah, satisfy himself. So I just think it's just a marvelous performance. It's one of the best I've ever seen, I think. And yeah, shame's definitely a apt title for the movie. Although, like, I don't think anyone should feel ashamed just because they're doing sex, like, having sex. Like, it's not something I don't think anyone should do. Like, I don't
Doing
know,
sex.
doing.
What a virgin, am I right, viewers?
Oh, the way I phrased that was genius. But no, generally, it's not. It's like it's not a. I don't think
No,
anyone should
he
feel
like,
ashamed by it.
yeah. No, of course he shouldn't feel ashamed, but, like, I think it's an apt title
Oh,
for
oh
the
yeah,
fact that he clearly
absolutely, yeah,
does.
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And Mark Ruffalo's character, within Thanks for Sharing, sort of talks about the stigma around sex addiction, which he defines it as a disease,
Yeah.
which I suppose any addiction, because it's a compulsion, it's a need, it's not a want. And I think that's clear here that there is a sense of romance, with per se, with say the character of Marianne that he goes out with, his coworker.
Hmm.
But, at the start we see him, paying a sex worker, and later, we see him having, the threesome. I think in at least both of those scenarios within the film, he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to do that, but he has to. And,
Hmm.
this sort of made me understand the situation a little bit more,
Yeah,
because
for sure.
there's characters within Thanks for Sharing, and I think Thanks for Sharing kind of, kind of like, it sort of mishandles the situation, where here I got to really empathize with the character of Brandon, and I got to see
Yes.
that
Yeah.
there was a disease, it was a compulsion, it was a need. Where in
Yeah.
Thanks for Sharing, you're kind of just like Josh Gad's kind of, not really psychologically well, is he?
Yeah, and I think because this film is more of a character development. Sorry, so it's more of like a character study, should I say, of Brandon in this case. Whereas Thanks for Sharing, I suppose it has to, by its own fault, I think it has to balance three plot lines of three different characters. So I think here, because just it focuses on Brandon, it allows it to explore more. And yeah, I think you're right. Maybe just consider like that sort of theme in life of that addiction. So I maybe look at it in a different way. And I mean, yeah, I think it's a very intelligent, very smart film, and one that definitely doesn't need a sequel. I think it just should.
No.
Yeah, I don't think it's never gonna get one, but I just think, yeah, just it's just perfect on its own.
Yeah, I definitely think, yes, a sequel would be a mess. But, one thing that I would like to see here, that we don't really see, and you had sort of mentioned previously before, you having to sort of like fill in the background when it comes to sort of Sissy and Brandon's childhood. And I
Hmm.
definitely wish that we'd seen more of Sissy, because this film is 80% Brandon, 20% Sissy. Everything we know
Yeah.
about Brandon, we know everything that we need to know. But when it comes to Sissy and their relationship, all we see is that it's dysfunctional. And I
Hmm.
think if you're going to have a character attempt suicide, if I was to compare it to, A Star Is Born, where, I mean, spoilers, Bradley Cooper's character commits suicide, you maybe don't, fully understand the depths of, what he's feeling in that moment. But,
Yeah.
he leaves a suicide note, you see into his mind. But here, I just don't think we ever see enough of Sissy, or hear enough from her to sort of understand, why she did that. I think maybe the abusive childhood that, was a sort of a potential backstory that you thought of. I maybe agree with that. As a potential,
Yeah.
cause for,
Yeah.
her, apparent, her, visually and, event based, apparent, depression.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think I just would have liked to hear or see of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I love. I think you're definitely spot on there, bud. Like the Sissy character is one I wish was in the movie more, and I think that's a credit to Carey Mulligan. Like she's I think she's great. I think she's really good in everything I've seen her in. So yeah, credit to her. And I mean, I don't have any more points for the film. I think it's just one of those films where it's difficult to watch at stages. It's just it just explores that theme just as it is. Like it is a guy dealing with the shame of an addiction. So I mean, I've no remarks from me. Anything from yourself?
Nothing else for me,
No
Matthew.
worries. Well, if you're gonna rate it out of 10, Callum, what would you rate it, bud?
Again, I would struggle here simply because of the ending of the film, which I do think is weak. But I think that, as I said, the entire independent film genre, I would say, I couldn't really think of a film where I was like, wow, that ending blew my mind. I'd be like, wow, that really made me think. Or, I thought, what would happen to that character after the film. I'm never mind blown by the ending of
Yeah,
that kind
yeah,
of
of
film.
course.
So here, it continues that trend, and I can't judge it for, being a part of the genre that it is a part of. So I can't really criticize it for that. But, it did sort of leave me wanting more a little bit, a bit more clarity, conclusivity.
Hmm.
But, aside from that, the performances are incredible, and I think the depiction of addiction is, very very compelling and pathetic. So I would give the film probably a 9.5 out of 10.
I think you've smashed it there, buddy. To be honest, this is one of my favorites ever. I think it's a phenomenal performance by Fassbender. I just love, yeah, like how just smart it is. Like it doesn't try to be something it's not. It's a remarkable character study, and yeah, for me, it's a 10. I absolutely love it. And I suppose the third and final film we're going to be talking about today is probably the one that deals with the theme of sex addiction outright, because it's a what would you call it? It's like a support group, would you say,
Yeah,
of people of these three lead characters, and how they sort of are helping each other along with their addictions. Thanks for sharing. So I'm gonna pass over to you to, yeah, just open up the
yeah.
floor.
This was a film that I was sort of immediately excited to watch and talk about just because it has Mark Ruffalo,
Of
who is
course,
a beautiful,
what's not
wonderful
to
man.
like? Exactly.
He's a comedic genius and a seemingly great guy. But to talk about his character of Adam, who is really the principal character, amongst the three storylines.
Hmm.
This character Adam is actively avoiding sex. It makes his relationship with Phoebe, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, all the more wholesome to me. Very different. In this film is that there's a central romance. Despite the addiction. This is very sort of refreshing within the genre because
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
we meet Adam at probably the height of his capability to try and overcome his addiction. We see him break his sobriety and sort of spiral near the end of the film. At the start of the film, he's doing very well. In the sense of the overcoming of the addiction. So
Yeah,
so when he actually gets to meet Phoebe, that their meet cute is exactly that. It's one of
it's
the
really
most
sweet.
convincing romances I think I've seen.
Yeah, I
We don't
absolutely
really
love
see much of them. For being a romantic comedy according to Netflix.
it.
I was really convinced.
Yeah.
Even in the short screen time, because that they're goofy, they're cute, they're silly.
Yeah, I know. They do a wee nice little Jiminy Cricket impression as well. And yeah, I mean, this is if someone had asked me like what's the best Mark Ruffalo performance, or what's definitive Mark Ruffalo, this is it. I mean, this is this is prime Mark for me. Prime Mark. Eh? This is premium Mark Ruffalo for me. The definitive performance. I think he's fantastic here. And one performance in here which really did blow me away was the musician Pink. Actually, she's in this. She's actually great, to be honest. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
No,
is
like
very.
you wouldn't like say that she's out of place within the film. I think everything she does is as admirable a performance as anyone else.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we've sort of mentioned, you mentioned there the meet cute between Phoebe and Adam. I think it's such a great romance. I love the dynamic. Those actors clearly have great chemistry. They've been in a lot of movies together, of course. And I mean, yeah, the film. I think the film, any film that has like three main characters, or you've got to have three separate plot lines, I think there's always going to be a confusion there, because I think for me there's always going to be one character who I prefer, and that's definitely Adam. I think Mark Ruffalo has the most screen time for the most part. Obviously, we've mentioned the issues we've had with Josh Gad's character. Like, I think they maybe push it too far with him. He's actively sort of breaking laws there. You know what I mean? Like, he's actively being a criminal, so it's kind of
Yeah.
uncomfortable in certain instances. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we previously, compared this film, to Alfie and to Shame, and we sort of said that this is the more Hollywood glamorized kind of
No, it
portrayal
is.
of,
No, it absolutely is. Yeah.
of addiction. But within the film, we see the characters of course, Adam, Neil, and Mike. And I think between the three of them, we see a sort of full full spectrum of recovery. But even the character of Mike, played by Tim Robbins, he seems to be he's the most well adjusted. He's in a you know he's in a relationship with his wife, and he's been sober a number of years. We see him sort of move to the idea of relapse near the end of the film. But I suppose that's an admirable point made by the film.
Yeah.
They've presented this spectrum, and I respect that they don't sugarcoat how difficult it is, because even the you know every single main character within this film relapses in some manner throughout the film. So they're saying even the most well-adjusted person is still one sort of sad or tragic event away from losing their grip.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
is sort of the truest message that this film is managing to portray.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, Callum, to be honest with you, mate. Like, the way you described it there is like the spectrum of recovery. Obviously, Neil is like he's like the first point where, he's lying about his day count. He's he's like filming up his boss's skirt, like he's doing weird stuff. And of course, Adam is kind of that middle point where he clearly has like almost like a nervous tick with his finger, where like he clearly has the compulsion to like look at women and things like that, but like he doesn't act on it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Mike, he's sort of settled down. He still has those urges potentially, but they're at bay. They're deep down. So I think that's a perfect explanation of it. It's actually a very smart thing I didn't actually realize. Credit to the film for that. And I think one character, obviously we've mentioned Josh Gad's Neil. He does some really awful stuff here, but I actually by the end of the film I did come around to him a little bit more, and maybe not fully, but I did like his development. He sort of becomes that sort of he becomes the Adam figure to him for Pink's character, Dee Dee, and I think that was a really smart evolution. It's sort of the first character development we've kind of seen in these
Mm.
films of today.
Yeah, I'd sort of questioned, throughout the film what the mindset of the film wanted us to have for the character of Neil, because clearly he's a deeply sick individual who, in my opinion, needs a lot more thorough psychological help than court
Yeah,
ordered, Sex Addicts Anonymous, But his admission of guilt, I think at least shows that the film and Neil are aware of this. But I just feel like he never truly gets the help that he needs,
hmm,
because
yeah,
they sort of treat him on a similar scale. Everybody is in that room, talking about the things that they've done, but the extent that other people are talking about are Adam has used sex, paid sex workers in the past, and Mike has previously cheated on his wife, but then this character is assaulting people, and they're sort of trying to put them on a level playing field, but I
yeah,
really don't think that that's the same thing. And
yeah,
sort of where I talked about in Shame, it's this desperation, and we see this compulsion, this need from Brandon to have sex, but I mean it's always consensual sex, but
yes,
here
yeah.
what we see from Neil, it really rides the line between
It does.
how far can how far can saying that you're addicted to sex go, like
Yeah, it
if you
does, doesn't
assault
it?
someone, does that mean that you no longer have culpability or blame?
Yeah, it's such a good point. Yeah, I think you're sure. I think you're right for sure. And I think one of the more heartbreaking bits of the film for me is when almost it's not actually when Neil sort of relapses. It's actually when Adam does, because he's such an integral character. Like it made me think, oh, he's never gonna relapse. But by the end, like he buys himself like a laptop, like in the middle of the night and stuff to satisfy himself. And yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking because I think the film, one thing I would maybe discredit it for is it feels like I can't make its mind up whether it wants Phoebe and Adam to be together or not.
Mm,
I wasn't convinced really by the end. It kind of wraps it up in a nice little bow, really really rushed, really quickly. I didn't really appreciate that. But I mean, yeah, there's. I think the film towards the end gets super weird, like it really does with his
yeah,
ex-girlfriend. I'm sure we'll
yeah,
probably try and talk about that as respectfully as we can, or as PG as we can. It gets weird. It gets weird. Role play stuff. It's
it gets
weird.
real weird.
Yeah,
But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Anytime we see sort of a character this likable, unravel in front of you, it is genuinely upsetting.
it is. Yeah,
To see like an actor like Mark Ruffalo, put the effort, uh, you know, you see through the character of Adam, how hard he is working, to stay on this path, and then to have to pick up pieces of their life following a relapse is, just it's really difficult to watch. And
it
I
is,
think
mate.
I think that's an absolute testament to Mark Ruffalo's performance, that you see him as a
Yeah,
person, not as a performance. You think, oh, what a sad life that would be to live. How desperate he is. He's I suppose the closest character to Brandon in Shame. Because he sort of is
the
still on the
disease
road
for
to
him.
recovery,
Yeah.
but also he's sympathetic.
Yeah, that's why I love each of these three films. I think they're all so different, and I think they really fit in well because obviously with Shame, it's more of a depression. It's more of like I would almost argue it kind of goes down like the mental illness route, where it's clearly like it's a mix of depression, but it's also a mix of like desperation, like you said. And Alfie, he just owns what he is. But here, it's like Mark Ruffalo describes it almost like a disease, kind of like similar to how depression operates for a lot of people. And yeah, I mean, I think here the conversation that Adam and Phoebe have about it, like Adam kind of, in Adam's eyes, Phoebe thinks she's perfect, and by her own admission, she's kind of thought she was until Adam made her question herself. And I think that's really a really smart thing of the film to do. And I think Adam's story is certainly the most strong. It's certainly the strongest plot line out of the three for me. Although Josh Gad's one is, I think it is quite an interesting one as well.
You know, this film is kind of bizarre to me because it's selected by Netflix as, you know, a comedy slash
Yeah,
romantic comedy,
it is.
and you know, for me, just the content is so far from funny. You know, it's the most comedic of the three that we've watched. I mean, Alfie's sort of this, you know, weird satirical kind of vibe, but you know,
Yeah, it
here
is.
this is one that's trying to tell jokes, but I just find so much of it distressing, honestly, that I think it's kind of bizarre to sort of list as a comedy. You know, I'd at least say
Yeah,
dark comedy or, you know, sex, you know,
yeah,
sort of.
yeah.
I mean, I
It's
feel like sex addiction in itself should be a genre, but I don't think it really is. You know, I think these
mhm.
probably just all come under the banner under the banner of, you know, independent film. You know, but I feel like all of these
Yeah.
films, you know, I feel like are I feel like there's enough within that, you know, to be a genre within itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's a really interesting genre, I think, for me, just addiction in general. And I think like it's sort of like I was going back to saying, because sex is something that like a lot of people have in their lives, that it's not like like a really harmful drug or anything like that. It's not illegal, like that. It just makes it just makes it a lot. I suppose it could be for people watching these movies. I suppose a lot of people potentially not, they probably can't relate on the scale of some of the characters in this, because a lot of the characters are sort of an extreme. But for the most part, I think, um a lot of people could sort of question their own relationships as to why they're in relationships and stuff like that. And I think that's why that's why Mark Ruffalo's performance is so good, because he makes other characters question themselves. Like you're sort of saying, it's the spectrum of the evolution of the addiction there. It's, Neil, Adam, Mike, and but by the end, it's sort of it's almost as if it becomes sort of Pink's character Dee Dee is sort of Neil, and then it becomes Neil is the Adam, and Adam is the Mike, and sort of Mike has completed the journey almost. That's how it felt to me,
Mm.
and I think it's a really smart film with that, and also it doesn't like Gwyneth Paltrow's barely in the film, but like it doesn't, how would I say it? Like it doesn't get bogged down with the romantic comedy aspect. The addiction is central there, which I appreciated a lot.
Yeah, and to discuss Mike, because you know we haven't really mentioned
Yeah,
him
yeah,
too
Mike.
much,
Yeah, go for it.
but you know, despite being the most recovered, I think he is, you know, unrelentingly unpleasant. You know, within the film, he sort of gives his son, who is, you know, a recently sober drug addict, a
Yeah,
lot of shit, you know, for what
he
he's done in
does.
the
He
past.
does, doesn't he?
But quite honestly, I would say giving your wife hepatitis C from cheating on her and beating your kids is a lot worse than stealing a necklace. So, you know,
Yeah,
I think Mike really needs to stop acting so self-righteous with his son. You know, because you know, near you know the start of the middle of the film, you know, his son apologized, which, you know, was necessary, I think, because you know you know, he has disappointed his parents. But you know, Mike should have in that moment as well. You know, he's an older guy, and you know, he's been sober for 12 or so years. You know, so you know, I really don't think he should give Danny as much trouble, you know, for not going to meetings
yeah.
just yet. If he was clearly, you know, an older guy when he started going, and you
Hmm.
know, I'm glad that, you know, Danny addresses it near the end of the film, that you know he really deserves an apology, because you know he's,
He
you know,
absolutely
because
does.
Mike has, you know, done a lot more wrong than he has,
Yeah.
you know, and you know Mike does apologize to him, but I just think it comes way too late in the game to be
Yeah, it
excusable.
does. And like I think that's why this film is so strong for me. Like every character has their demons, and Mike is definitely not without his. I think he's up there with a very, he's a Neil level of moral corruption almost. Like he's done some awful things, and well, clearly by the end of the film, like he apologizes. But yeah, it was very late in the day, very late in the game for that business, that carry on. But yeah, I think the three plot lines are so different, but they're so similar in a sense as well. So I think it's a very strange film to review, because it kind of feels a mix of a lot of different genres. Like there's clearly romantic comedy aspects in there, but would I call it romantic comedy? Absolutely not. Like I think it's probably very misplaced in Netflix. Like if I was scrolling through, with a hypothetical girlfriend, on Netflix, like looking for romantic comedies to watch. Thanks for Sharing is probably not the one I'd pick. You know what I mean? I'd be very disappointed if this is like if this is like a romantic comedy or billed as that. It's definitely not that for me. It's got undertones, but it's not a romantic comedy at all. But yeah, I just think it's a very great space sweepers style of takes a lot from a lot of genres and does it well.
Hmm. Yeah, I just think they sort of like what one issue with the film is I just think they did bungle the handling of how serious a topic it is, because I think
Yeah, I
I
get
think
that.
that issue arises a lot from not only the character of Neil but also the ending of the film.
Yeah,
I've mentioned before in Shame that independent films of the last 10 years or so very rarely stick the landing with the ending, and I think that is the case here. And you mentioned it before that it does feel like there's a real sense of lack of conclusivity. Where they try to like wrap things up neatly. It's kind of really not evident of the character growth that they clearly think they've accomplished. You
yeah,
say that Neil has become the new Adam, and that is I think exactly what the film is trying to accomplish. But I just think they've failed, and they're like, we're fucking geniuses.
yeah. It does, doesn't it? It wraps it up way, way, way too quickly. The film sort of goes from 0 to 100, doesn't it? When his Adam's the ex girlfriend comes into the picture, and she demands that he interact with her in a sexual way that he is not comfortable with, to which she
I mean,
tries.
he seemed pretty comfortable with it up until the
Yeah, I did.
domestic violence fantasy, but up to that point, he seemed
He
very
seemed
up for it. And
very up
I
for
think
it. Yeah,
you need to assess. Uh, you know,
you do.
I think that's probably a different meeting that he has to go to if he was cool with that.
Yeah, put it this way, like it's not this isn't it's probably not a scene in the film I'd watch with a family member. Do you know what I mean? It's a
No,
very,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
we're I sort of said this to you the other day. We're recording this episode very late. But, based on what I've been watching over the past few days with these films, it's not the worst thing that my neighbors have heard. That a lot of moments within this film concerned me greatly.
yeah. Just imagine your neighbors like, what the fuck's going on in there? But yeah, that wraps up my thoughts for them. Thanks for sharing, Callum. Anything from yourself, dude?
Nothing more from me, Matthew.
Well, I'd love to hear your rating for this one, mate. What would you give it?
Well, I do think it did slightly mishandle some perceptions of people with sex addiction. I think
Yeah,
that by categorizing Neil and the rest of the cast as having the same affliction, I think is I think that's sort of a that that it's not a fair representation,
hmm,
because I think it's an entirely different situation. So I think the handling of that was quite poor. But there's nothing
yeah,
earth shattering about the film, but I did really enjoy it. I certainly don't understand why the film received such a mediocre reception. I would give it a very sort of favorable review with the caveat that Neil is a big problem. Thankfully he doesn't take up the majority of the screen time, but I probably would say everything about the film, if you take Neil out, is great. I think he's the only thing really dragging this film down. Sort of categorizing him as they're the same situation. I think that is a problem.
yeah.
So for his sort of percentage of the screen time, I would probably take some points off the film, but
Fair
I'd
enough.
probably give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's a very perfect review, mate. To be honest with you, blathered on about this every podcast pretty much, but I just like films that just deal with ordinary life stuff, and this film just deals with things that I'd imagine some people experience in their lives, and I think the performances, it feels like real people. Like we mentioned the meet cute, it feels so authentic, and the actors have great chemistry. They blend in so well. The characters, obviously there's development there that has issues. We've mentioned Neil. I think Adams is by the end is a little bit questionable too with how that's wrapped up with Phoebe, but on the whole I think an incredible study of that kind of addiction, and yeah, probably a 9 out of 10 for me as well. But yeah, I mean, that wraps up another podcast episode. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, but it's been one of my favorites to record. Actually, I've went in depth, and I mean, I'll pass over to you to explain. We only I suppose do future episode chat than a podcast usually, so
Hmm.
I'll hand that over to you, mate, to explain what's going to be coming up the next week or two.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about some serious stuff today, so I hope we approached it with the
Yes, yes,
as
likewise. Yeah,
delicately as we could have. With some serious stuff that we don't fully understand. Because of course we of course are not in the same situation, and we probably we
yeah,
would struggle even to sort of see into that situation. So I hope we've approached it with all the sensitivity possible,
definitely.
and really just assess the quality of the film, and sort of how the characters seem to feel. But if we're to talk about future episodes, next week, I hope to have us talk about films where, I mean, I don't want to give you too many details because of the films that I've asked you to watch, and I don't want to give too much away. But you know, we'll be dealing with an episode sort of mental health adjacent. You know, with further details that I'll get into when we do that episode, because I don't want to give too much away to Matthew for the films that I'm suggesting we watch. So that'll be hopefully next week's podcast. We'll also be doing a couple of mini reviews here and there.
Yeah.
You know, Judas and the Black Messiah, I don't think is available for UK audiences just yet, but I think coming out next week we have Raya and the Last Dragon,
Yeah, big
and
film.
we
Yeah, first
have
big film of the year, really. Actually, isn't it? I
one,
suppose one of them.
and yeah, massive. And then I think Chaos Walking is coming out, but I don't actually
Yeah,
know how that's being
heard about that
released.
one.
If it's on digital, then it's available to us. But if it's in cinemas, of course, that's not possible
Yeah.
or feasible for us right now, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
But
yeah.
that should be for the near future. What we'll be talking about. There's also Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is an overdue review that we'll be recording this week. You know that we hope
Yeah,
to get out to you, because I thought it was a fantastic film. Love to
absolutely.
talk about it.
Million percent. So yeah, as Callum said, next week is going to be another themed episode, and with us finishing the Disney films, I think a theme episodes are going to be ones that we're going to go back to a bit more, just to like expand our filmography a bit more, and just films, because there's some of our, I think that's some of our favorite episodes to record, and this has certainly been one of mine. And as Callum said, well, we're not experts on sex addiction by any means. You know, we're 19. We have limited life experience, especially with a lockdown going on. So you know, it's not much we can experience these days. But I mean, yeah, we hope we covered it as respectfully as we could, and hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys are all safe and well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well too, guys. Take care and bye bye.
Bye bye.